I'm Josh. I'm part of the team at Revelator. Um, in case this is your first time joining one of these sessions, I'll give you a very quick intro to Revelator. Revelator is a provider of distribution services to independent record labels, to music businesses, and to some other distribution platforms. We license the core tech so that our partners can focus on, the exciting part, which is the music itself. Revelator works with more than 200 partners based all across the globe. I know there might be a couple of people here who are current partners of ours. Our team is also internationally based as well. So we've got people in the UK, people in North America, people in Latin America. We've got people kind of, all over the globe at the moment. My background, I've been at Revelator since April of last year. I work across our marketing team and also a little bit across our newly launched label services department, which is a new angle of the Revelator business. My personal background is in the music industry. I kind of fell into the music industry by accident through starting a music blog about 15 years ago. It was, not particularly intentional. From starting a music blog, I got very lucky and ended up going to work in A&R for 7 or 8 years. I would kind of during that time, was responsible, well, not responsible, but helped the careers of kind of quite a few artists that went on to do very well, such as Hosier, Declan McKenna, The Neighborhood, a few others. From there, I moved into management about 6 years ago. And I've been a Revelator in the marketing team for coming up to 18 months now. Anyway, it's my pleasure to introduce Stevie, who I've known for I think about more than a decade now, probably back from the music blog days.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll let Stevie introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. My name is Stevie Red McMinn. So I started off in the music industry as an artist, really. I was in a band called Mount Wolf. I mean, we still are a band, not very active anymore. We are still sort of writing. I'm actually doing a writing session this week, but it's like, my full-time job these days is I run a record label. I started the record label when I was in Mount Wolf. And in hindsight, it was quite a good time to start a record label. Like, it was during the Hype Machine days, which Josh's blog was part of one of the Hype Machine, blogs. And I got to know a lot of the blogosphere at that point. Then Spotify became really prominent, and I got friendly with like the playlisters, and it really helped that I was in a hype band, Mount Wolf, at the time. So I was able to build these relationships with not only the blogs, but like, the people who were responsible for the playlists on Spotify. And there was like a period of like 2015 to 2018 in particular, where for no money at all, like I started my label in my bedroom with no money, and you could basically take an act from zero to, hundreds of millions of streams just through like getting in contact with the right people, sort of thing. And the music had to be really, really good. But like, so that was how the label grew. And then, there's been various different changes over the years. And obviously now the thing that we're going to be talking about today is like TikTok. That's the kind of the big opportunity for people. And then I mean, we'll talk about this, but I started posting on TikTok myself, since like October, really, like properly. And I've sort of ended up being invited to these sorts of things and become a little bit of a music industry commentator, if you will. Again, sort of completely fallen into it. Like, it was just following my gut. But so here we are.
Awesome. Thanks, Stevie. Yeah, it's been super interesting watching your platform grow, or your kind of, you rise on there. And I think you've got about 15, 16,000 followers on there now. And, I think your videos are great because they give a really good kind of insight to artists in terms of what's working on the platform and also like why it's working. And I think that's like such a key thing. So many artists, I think there's still this sort of fear almost around TikTok. It's such a kind of like unknown still for so many artists and labels and their teams. There's no kind of one surefire way of something working. But I think your videos, especially the ones I've seen you do where you kind of react to viral videos and break down why you think it's gone viral and that kind of thing is really, really worthwhile. So I definitely recommend giving Stevie a follow on TikTok. And I guess just to set the tone for the rest of the session, just how important do you feel TikTok is for new artists at this point?
I mean, like, I was just talking about how in the time that I've been in the music industry, which is about 15 years, same as you, I think there's always been new opportunities and things change all the time. But like right now, I can't see any other opportunity other than TikTok as being the thing that, you know, in terms of like getting you from zero to where you want to be. Like it's just it's all about TikTok, and it's not just about music as well. I kind of had this epiphany, and one of the reasons why I started posting myself is that like, just if you're an entrepreneur in any business, if you want to do anything and you want to build an audience or build a community, then the fastest and best way of doing that is TikTok. So that was just kind of like, I kept listening to different podcasts, and it was just like everyone who was on these podcasts, the thing that they had in common was that they had millions of followers on social media. And I was just like, this is like the new world that we're living in, you know. And there's a lot of, as we know, there's a lot of like Addison Rae and people like that who are, you know, influencers who are then becoming pop stars. So it's like, you know, or Tate McRae, it's like they were doing something first and foremost. But yeah, I mean, it just is so important. It's and at the beginning as well, when TikTok first became a thing, I hated it. Like I remember just thinking, like, because I didn't really know anything about it, and I just thought it was like for dance videos and stuff. And I'm a millennial, so I just felt like it was alien to me, and I was just like, and then it was only, I think it was the Good Neighbors viral hit and like Artemis, where, you know, I'd come through the blogosphere and like, you know, the Hype Machine days and that sort of thing, and going like an artist from Good Neighbors, for instance, where I kind of I don't know them, but like loosely knew of them through other people, like two songwriters who kind of got together, wrote this song Home, then was sort of, you know, themselves made it go viral on TikTok. It then ended up in today's top hits on Spotify. And I was just like, within like a few months. And I was just like, there's no other point in history where that could have happened. Because for you to end up in today's top hits, like back in even like 2015 when I first started the label, you would have to have so many different gatekeepers like back you and put so much money behind you. Yeah, like it's just wild. Like it's completely revolutionized, I think, the music industry.
Yeah, I think something I kind of often say, and it depends the group I'm in as to how well it goes down, is that to me it feels like there's never been a better time to be an independent artist or to be
Yes,
signed to an independent label, right?
I
Like,
agree.
yes, there's a huge number of challenges, whether it's kind of royalty payouts, whether it's, the amount of music, those things are undoubtedly challenges, but also the tools you have at your disposal are kind of greater than ever before. I think one thing that and I'm kind of a bit of a romantic when it comes to music and brands and everything. But for me, it's all about storytelling music. Songs are storytelling themselves, and then kind of beyond that, the way you market them is all about how you tell the story. I know as well that's something you kind of touch on when it comes to when you talk about these artists that are performing well on TikTok. So when it kind of comes to you're an artist creating a video, you're working with an artist creating one, and you know that you've got a user who's flicking through maybe 40, 50, 60 videos in the matter of a few minutes. What are the kind of hooks that you can put in play as an artist that make sure that your video is the one that someone stops on, and your video is the one that someone engages with? What kind of things should artists be looking into to do that?
Well, I think it changes all the time. And like, for instance, at the time when Artemis and Good Neighbors were doing it, it was like very, very, there are trends on TikTok, and it was like POV, for instance, with Good Neighbors, they kind of tapped into this idea that home was like a person or a feeling almost. And it was just like POV when you feel like you've met the person who feels like home, or they would have said it in a sort of snappier way than that. And then they would have, I think they just like took photos from Pinterest and just like would have photos of like some cool looking couple. It could be like a loft in New York or something with some aspirational scene with their music playing on the top of it. And I see a lot of this at the moment as well. It's like a lot of text on screen on carousels, where it's like the first thing catches someone's attention to then get them to carry on reading, and they just have the artist's music is just playing over the top of it. And the kind of beautiful thing with that, and this is one of the things that we're telling our artists at the moment, is it's very low maintenance. You don't have to spend that much time, like lip syncs or something like that. Like I think there's a few artists I feel like once you start building a following, you kind of like it's good to sort of show off your brand and your aesthetic. So I think a great artist is like Erin LeCount for doing this, and her kind of way of doing that is like through lip syncs essentially, or it certainly was at the beginning of this year anyway, when I first really started paying attention to her and she's really started showing up on my For You page. A lot of it was just like her performance. She'd look consistent. She'd be almost wearing the same outfit. She'd be in the same, like she'd almost designed her room to look like a set, which was like an Erin LeCount world. And then she would be performing to the camera, and there would be some sort of hook at the beginning, text on screen to kind of tell you what the song was about, and then it was essentially just her like performing to camera. So there's various different ways of doing it, but I just always think, and this is what I've been saying on TikTok, is like people are often scrolling on mute. So it's the text on screen, and it's the whatever you can do. Like text on screen helps, like the on-screen text, but also your performance. It has to kind of stop people in their tracks to think, I want to actually listen to this. And then I always say this to artists: just have your music playing over the top of it. Because if you're being an influencer, if you're doing some sort of comedy sketch or something, and your music is not playing over the top of it, and then you get like thousands of followers, and then you try and pivot to then introducing your music. By that point, people might not even be interested in your music. They might just be more interested in the whatever you're doing. If you act more like an influencer, it's then difficult to whereas the thing that you care about, it's not about getting followers on TikTok, it's about getting listeners on Spotify. It's about getting people or selling tickets. So I always think having your music over the top of everything that you do is like what you should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just see it as a marketing platform. That's it, really.
Yeah. It's interesting. I saw some stats the other day as well about how actually it's very rare that someone on TikTok, when they hear a new song, will actually take a step beyond just watching the video the first time. That actually it usually takes them hearing that sound 3 or 4 times before they actually take the next action, which is either to engage with the artist or to go on Spotify and save the song, or whatever it is. And I think Erin LeCount, who you mentioned, is a great example. I think she probably came up on my feed at probably a similar time she did with you. And yeah, like you said, it was the consistency. I think she was posting kind of sometimes twice a day using the same snippet of sound. Like you said, very consistent branding, very striking in terms of how it looked, but also still quite relatable for the kind of target audience, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I find as well that that because of the way these algorithms have become smarter and in a way kind of more a bit scarier over the past kind of few years, it kind of feels less like trying to pitch your music out so that it reaches everyone, and more like trying to put it out there so that you kind of find your sort of intended niche. And you touched on that a bit, talking about the kind of like it's almost like trying to bounce off other artists when you're doing it, right? The world you want your music to live in, and so you try and feed things out to TikTok to land within that world. I don't know, is that something you've kind of noticed at all as well?
Yeah, so I mean, there's plenty of artists doing this, but there's an artist off the top of my head, Fliss, who I think's only just recently released a song, but it was on TikTok for a while, but I think it's only just on Spotify. And she's been sort of tapping into this feeling like almost like a Fleetwood Mac kind of 70s. She started dressing her, like even the way that she dresses and everything is kind of in that world. But then she's also been sort of tapping into Daisy Jones and the Six. She's like the kind of music that, if you're a fan of Daisy Jones and the Six, then you'll be a fan of. So I think I've seen artists do this quite a lot. Like they'll use either a TV program or they'll use another artist and be like, where are all my Daisy Jones and the Six fans at, or whatever, that sort of thing. I think when you're really brand new, because I think Erin LeCount is now probably established enough where she can do what she wants almost. But if you're starting from zero, or you're starting from scratch, or you're starting from like, you don't even have. I often talk about it in like a video game sort of sense of like there's different levels to which on TikTok. And if you're in level 1 and you're talking about the algorithm, you need to try and find your people on the algorithm. So when you're kind of in that level 1, like I've even noticed this on my channel myself. I feel like now every video that I post is generally going out to an audience of people that are going to be interested in it. Whereas at the beginning, you had to do more. You kind of had to work harder, whether it be the text on screen, because I think it's become more like a YouTube sort of type thing, where it's more like a search engine. So if you put certain words in, like keywords, like on the text on screen or within your caption or within the hashtags, I think that all that kind of stuff helps to the algorithm to then find who your people are. So, just Fliss as an example, if your music sits in a world like sort of sounds a bit like Fleetwood Mac, or sits in a world where 1970s or whatever, that kind of Laurel Canyon scene in California, then that kind of Daisy Jones and the Six, like constantly having that as a hashtag, I think is very, very, very smart.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's almost like picking some picking like half a dozen kind of like cultural touch points and like making sure you're kind of reaching them. It's almost like if you like, it's kind of like going on Amazon and you get recommended products. If you like this, you also like this. I noticed, you've probably seen her stuff on your feed as well, but an artist called Chloe Slater,
Yeah.
and I saw she did an entire music video recently that was basically recreating some of the scenes from Normal People. And Normal People in itself is like, I know, is a big thing on TikTok. And so because of that, they would then had all this footage they could then, and this behind the scenes stuff they could share on TikTok that you could tell was kind of hitting the same algorithm as the Normal People fandom in a way, which is really interesting.
I think Good Neighbors did that. I could be wrong, but I think Good Neighbors did that with Home as well. I think they were using, as I said, they were using like photos that they found on Pinterest, but I also think they were using like clips from, not clips, but like maybe stills from movies. And I think Normal People was one of the ones that they did that with. But it's clever because you're tapping into an emotion, you're tapping into a feeling, and then if you have your song over the top of that, I mean, I've seen. There's a guy called Berlioz, who's like a more electronic. He's kind of a bit more like Bonobo. It's kind of electronic jazz. His name's Ted Jasper. I was actually talking to him a while ago about potentially working with him, but he's got like clips from like I don't know whether it's movies or what, but it's like 1970s, a bit like a cab driving in New York or something, and it'll be like, this is the soundtrack to that moment, sort of thing, and then his music will be playing, and or it'll be like a jazz club in like New York or something. He very much tapped into this world and this feeling via the visuals, and then the music sort of fits in that world. So you can basically do anything really, like clips.
Yeah,
whatever.
I think that's it. When I talk to artists, I try to put across that it's not how sort of maybe the internet or these sort of programs were, or the apps were kind of like 10, 15 years ago, where there was certain types of music that worked a lot better. It's not either pop music or nothing. Like actually, if you're making slightly left field kind of ambient drone music and you manage to pair it with some cool visuals, there is an audience out there for it, like on TikTok, because the sheer breadth and diversity of people using the platform, there are going to be people out there who are interested in that. It's just about finding them. And I think it seems like a key part of finding these people, finding kind of your own niche, is just comes down to the consistency, right? Just comes down to making sure, it's sharing your own music over and over again. It's kind of the visuals all lining up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that let the audience be the judge of the songs that you don't always, in a way, like the A&R people, I think probably don't have as much power as they used to, because like when the industry that we grew up in, it was like everything would be chosen. Gatekeepers would choose the song, but it would then be serviced to radio and PR or whatever. Whereas these days you can basically test songs on TikTok. If a clip or a snippet, like test various different moments from your catalog of songs. It doesn't have to be new music. It could be a song that you released 5 years ago. Like just test it on the platform. Anything that gets bite, like anything that has traction, like 15,000 views or whatever, just keep hammering that same snippet again and again and again. Because as you were kind of talking about touch points, like a person, like your average person probably needs like 5 or 6 touch points before they actually become interested. And touch points is basically just them hearing that song again and again and again. I mean, I've heard of different artists actually creating multiple accounts to kind of flood the platform with a particular sound, to kind of do their own influencer marketing. Like I've heard of big artists doing this as well. Like I hear of management teams doing this sort of thing. Like it just seems like, you know, major label marketing teams, big management companies, everyone is just focused on, you know, it's marketing through TikTok like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I know artists who have gone into major label meetings and it's just like, what are you doing to go viral on TikTok? Like it's the whole industry is completely obsessed with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. One trend I've seen in the past kind of 6 months or so, kind of on the rise, I don't know if you've noticed this as well, has been artists having kind of multiple accounts. So they
Mm.
have like their own main account, which is sort of kind of like the commercial face of the artist. It's where they put, any like snips from music videos, and it's where they put tour dates and stuff like that. But then they
Mm-hmm.
also have another kind of like personal account almost, which is almost like a kind of BTS vlog style account.
Mm-hmm.
I think Neve Ella is a very good example. He's got a really good one where, and clearly it's clearly a tactic where if you can hook people in on the kind of main commercial one, there's some people who actually don't really want to go beyond that. Like they don't want to engage in the artist with the artist further than that, but they're happy to have the kind of shiny commercial stuff pop up to them every now and then. But then
Mm-hmm.
you've got fans that do want to go further and actually want to, become like emotionally invested essentially in the artist. And I'm sure that every now and then they get fed the kind of more, direct to the camera stuff from the artist. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting. I guess it's a way of sort of ensuring that your main account isn't kind of suffering on the algorithm side of things, while
Mm-hmm.
also ensuring that the fans that really want to lean in and really want to kind of have more, like, are able to do so. I don't know if you've noticed that as well.
Yeah, and like Nivella, her management company, Special Projects, who look after the Youngblood, and I know that Youngblood has like his team have like actually got some of his fan accounts, like people who started organic fan accounts of Youngblood. They've actually then like contacted these people and I think got them as part of their team, sort of thing. So a lot of these artists as well, these particularly like bigger artists, are really really savvy with doing that and actually partnering up with all the fan accounts and then like leaking certain things when they want things to go, you know, big on TikTok or I don't know, backstage bits or whatever, giving these people more access than they would usually. Because yeah, the more that you're talked about, the better, essentially, and it's the best marketing platform in the world. So
And how this is something I've never really kind of known the answer to, and I think it's kind of a tricky one. TikTok is essentially a co-creation platform, right? It's all about taking existing content and being able to remix it, edit it, rework it, however, whether you're, an 80-year-old or whether you're a 16-year-old using the app for the first time, anyone can do it essentially. How as an artist do you encourage that kind of co-creation? How do you encourage that kind of sense of community, do you think?
when you say co-creation, what do you mean exactly?
So I guess anything from, whether it's kind of having people do a dance to a song or whether it's having them use a certain sound over a particular, it's a trend of some sort. How do you, because quite often, you see, and it tends to come more from the major labels, whenever they try to kind of inorganically push one of these things, it doesn't tend to work. When an artist stands up and says, "Hey, do this dance," people think it's really uncool and they don't do it. But then on the other hand, you've got, I don't know, there was one a couple of weeks ago of an artist, Samia, I believe, who
Mm-hmm.
had a kind of clip that went viral of people where I think it was about their last sort of moment. No, it was either their last moments with their pet or it was something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
my understanding is that it happened fairly organically. How do you think artists, do you think it's something artists have control over, or do you think those moments just happen naturally if you are consistent in your output?
I think in terms of tapping into trends and that sort of thing, I mean, as a label, I would never ask the artist to do like any sort of dance or anything like that because I just know that they wouldn't be comfortable doing it. But there are so many different trends on TikTok for various different things. I just encourage the artists to actually use the platform more. Start because I this is what I did myself. Start training the algorithm to start seeing stuff that is going to be useful to you, particularly in the pursuit of you trying to build an audience or whatever. Like I feel like now everything that I see is all around music. Whereas previously, before I started actually posting on TikTok, it would just be random, I don't know, whatever clips from movies or clips from interviews, or it could be famous people like in Hollywood or whatever. It wouldn't necessarily be around music. So I just encourage the artists to use the platform, like videos when they see something of an artist that is a few steps ahead of them, or actually seek out some artists that are actually a few steps ahead of them in the same world as them. So for instance, like, you know, one of the bands on the label Modern Love is like an indie band, and like we've often used the example of like South Arcade, which is like a sort of rock, they're more like a rock, sort of pop rock band. And actually they're a really interesting case study, because when people think of viral on TikTok, you just think of like the Good Neighbors and the, you know, Lola Young and those kind of people. But there's actually plenty of artists, and South Arcade are a good example of this, who've got like a really good avid fan base, which they've grown exclusively through TikTok, and they're selling tickets. Like they basically went from like, you know, supporting bands in London at like 300 cap rooms, and then 18 months later selling out Coco, and it was because of TikTok. So like it can, you don't need to even be like massively viral in order for that to happen. You can kind of like sell tickets and all the rest of it. So I think when it comes to trends and stuff like that, if there's a trend that one of the artists, when they've been using the platform, feels like it would be relatable or relevant to what they're doing, or they could somehow fit it in with their music, then it's like definitely try it. But I think, as I was saying, I always encourage artists to have their music over the top of whatever they're doing. So I think, I mean, another thing that I've been saying is like, if you see on-screen text that has obviously worked to grab people, then just copy it from that other artist, put in the relevant information of whatever, you know, who you are. And then we've got artists doing that. And it's like, I often talk about this on TikTok, but I think the artists who are willing to throw their ego out the door, like are the ones who are sort of getting ahead on TikTok. Because you have to be really, you have to post. I saw a TikTok growth coach the other day say that before you post 100 posts on TikTok, you're probably not going to get that much traction. So that's crazy. If you're starting a fresh account, you've got to post 100 times really before the algorithm's going to really know who you are. Like, so that takes a level of perseverance, you know, resilience to just keep going, even if you're getting no results.
Yeah. And how do you get over, you know, I've never posted a TikTok in my life because of my kind of own insecurities, I guess, in terms of talking into a camera. I don't even like taking selfies, let alone videos.
Mm.
How do you get over that kind of ego like hurdle? Like how do you know, either as an individual or as an artist, or like, hey, how do you get past that?
Um, I think you know, it's how much you want it. I think if you've got to have a why, and I think sometimes even like the artists that like I also I'm a coach now as well. So that was one of the reasons why I started posting myself, because I started posting more kind of stuff around mindset on TikTok. But then I did a couple of posts about music, and I just felt like even a lot of the people that I was coaching, they were you know, were artists, and I feel like the people that wanted me to coach them were artists, and I feel like I realized that there's so many people who really don't know how the music industry works at all. And it kind of made me realize like where I was at. And when I first got into the music industry, when I first moved to London, I didn't know anything. I really didn't know anything. So when I first started posting on TikTok, it was more like I was answering questions that I got, you know, comments from videos and that sort of thing. I felt like it was more of a community. And actually for me, like in terms of getting over it, I just felt like it was easier than Instagram, because on Instagram, it's like I've got friends from school, or I've got like my cousins or my parents or whatever. You care more what those people think. Whereas when I first started TikTok, like it felt anonymous. Um, and so for me personally, and I've you know, I know other artists who have said the same thing. Like they, for some reason, they feel it's like it's harder for them on Instagram, but TikTok feels more like fun, whatever, you know. And also you just get more traction on TikTok as well. But going back to like how do you get over it? I think the why has to be big enough. Like why, you know, why to do it. And when I coach artists or even speak to artists on the label, it's like the first thing is their mindset. It's like, do they really want it enough? Do they see the opportunity with TikTok? Like, can they really buy into it? Like as a thing. Once they've actually then bought into it, once they've got the motivation to do it, then it's becoming like it's like motivation and discipline. You kind of need like both. And you have to kind of get used to being uncomfortable. Like anyone who, this is just like, it's basically adopting a bit of a growth mindset. It's like, you know, going to the gym or going for a run, you know, or even as a musician, I think if you start playing the guitar when you've never played before, you're going to be shit at first. It's going to be uncomfortable. Like there's going to be a stage where you're not very good. So you just have to keep going through that. And it's like, go back to the reason why you started playing the guitar in the first place and kind of think of it in that way. and then you just have to, yeah, you almost have to fail in public a little bit, like that's. But I think another thing that I often say to artists is that nobody cares until you're big on the platform. Nobody, and because it's so disposable, nobody really goes back and looks at your early videos. So it's like it's only the videos now that they're seeing, and it's like generally at that point, when you start getting a bigger audience, you've been doing it for a while, because so you become sort of more resilient. I think at first, like, you're in the kind of, you know, just 300 600 view jail, like it's not a big deal, because like nobody in the music industry or whatever really knows that you're even doing it in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel the conversations I have with artists starting out is they're all terrified of that, like, oh, well, what happens if it doesn't go viral? Like, what do I do until then? And I guess the message is just kind of, you have to stick with it. You have to have like enough belief in what you're doing personally, right? In terms of your music and in terms of your, the story around what you're creating. And also just kind of, like we touched on earlier, I guess, believe that at some point it will find that right niche, that right hook will land, and suddenly, you'll open up to a whole new audience that, didn't see any of your previous videos, like you said, and aren't judging you. Actually, all they know is, the one they've just come in on, essentially.
Yeah, like it's like if you were standing in a if you were trying to hit a home run, like if on TikTok, like nobody sees your misses, nobody sees it every time you fail, really, because whereas they only see that the industry and the people in general only start to care when it starts doing well. So in a way that can be liberating, I think. Like
Yeah,
if you're not getting that many views, then nobody's going to see it anyway, really, in the grand scheme of things. And
yeah,
that in itself can obviously be disheartening. But I think there's a freedom in that. There was for me anyway.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And in terms of, so say, you've got a new artist who's had a moment on TikTok, or had, not necessarily a moment, because I think that sort of sometimes suggests, huge virality, but even, you've got a video that's clocking up, I don't know, a few thousand, plays. How do you make the most of that? What do you think the next steps are to kind of, to win that, or to, well, you've got the audience in the door. How do you make sure you keep them like sticking around? How do you then, as you touched on earlier, how do you turn them into, potentially a ticket buyer, or a merch buyer, or, a more engaged fan?
I think like TikTok is slightly different from Instagram, because obviously, like, on Instagram, once someone follows you on Instagram, you've got the grid and then you've got Instagram Reels. Whereas TikTok is just purely like it's all discovery. So you've got to think of it every single time that you're posting. It's like 99% of the people are new people. So don't care about pissing people off on TikTok. So the artists that I see that are doing well and they have sort of viral moments are posting the same song relentlessly again and again and again and again. It's like you look at Somber or someone like that. Like if you actually go and have a look at his TikTok and you kind of go back, like he's been posting relentlessly, like the songs that have gone viral. He's probably posted 100 different clips or 100 different posts of that. Like, and Aaron LeCount's done a similar thing. Like I just feel like these artists understand that it's like a discovery tool. It's purely discovery, and then the community that you will then build is like, I noticed this as well. Like some people, if they really like you enough, they'll go and find you on Instagram, or they'll go and listen to you on Spotify. And it's like the followers on Spotify and the followers on Instagram are like your proper fans, really. I
Yeah,
don't care. I don't care that much about followers on TikTok. It's a sign. It's a sign of like how well you're doing, I guess, in terms of like how well your posts are doing. But like, it's not really apart from stories. There's not really a way of if you want to sell tickets and that sort of thing, it's better to do that. I feel like on Instagram once you've actually got people. Like it feels like through the grid posts and through the stories on Instagram, it's a bit more sophisticated in order to, or even to like build a mailing list, that sort of thing. Like you've then really, I just see TikTok as purely a marketing platform. It's like I use the analogy of a billboard. It's just like when you see like the tube posters, it's like an opportunity for you to put up an advert every single time for your song. So it's free as well. So you just do that 100 times. And if you get a bit of I was using Sombra as an example, or even Aaron LeCount, if you get a bit of a bit of a moment or a bite or something, or it's a bit of traction, they just go again and again and again and again and again. I mean, it's an artist can go as many times as they want until however Artemis or Good Neighbors, like their songs have got I mean, the Artemis track has now got 1 billion streams, which is crazy. So you can kind of, as an artist, you can, once it gets to 100 million streams, you at that point you can be like, okay, this is enough for me now, or you could be like, no, I want to keep going. You know,
Yeah.
it's up to the artist and their team, I think, really.
Yeah, I think for me, there's an element of almost having to view what you do on TikTok as kind of culturally separate to what you're creating in the
mm,
music. Because I
mhm.
think some artists feel that I don't know. I mean, I'm not an artist. I've never had to do this myself. But some of the feedback I get is they kind of feel it's a bit cheap sometimes. You know, they're like, oh, well, a video of me filming myself lip syncing a song or doing a trend, whatever it is, to me, that feels a million miles away from maybe spending a couple of £1,000 on a music video or, having a really great photo shoot with a professional photographer. And I think it's about having to kind of separate the two things, right? And viewing them as completely different worlds. Like, you can have your polished content and your kind of really, really deep thought out stuff. But if you're also not doing the kind of the fundamentals that work on the more user generated kind of content platforms, then you're probably not going to get as far as you'd like, right?
Well, it's like radio that became a way of building an audience. Like whenever radio first became the big thing, and then it changed the way that people wrote music. So they were like, okay, we need to write songs that are like 2 minutes, 3 minutes for radio, like singles for radio. So the artists have always had to write music to a format, so to speak, or do something like all of their artistry has had to fit within a format. The same is true of music videos. The only reason why music videos is a thing is because of MTV in the 80s. Like it became the new format. So TikTok is just the best way of getting your music in front of an audience. So the artists who are willing to play the game, so to speak, or like, I don't know, like use the format they have, short form, essentially. And then I think Erin LeCount, as an example, there's lots of other artists who do this, but like I think when they use it as an extension of their art, that's like another great way of looking at it. Because it's world. I mean, this is such a buzzword in the music industry, but it's building. Like it's a way of like getting people in, and and it's a visual thing, obviously, and it's the way you can hook people in. I just
Yeah.
think you have to see it as an opportunity rather than like a chore.
Yeah, yeah. And from a label owner perspective, how much does TikTok come into play, both in terms, when it comes to signing new artists, and also, how much does it come into kind of your, you've mentioned, it's a marketing tool, but how much does it come into your marketing kind of strategy with your artists, and how influential do you find it?
I think it's changed for me. Like in the past 5 years, I feel like it took me a minute to adapt, so to speak. I was just like, so it was all so alien to me, TikTok. Whereas now I just see it as a massive opportunity. And I also have worked with artists who just feel really, really uncomfortable using TikTok. And I've seen how difficult it is. Like right now, it's really, really difficult to get anything off the ground if an artist is not willing to use TikTok or social media as a whole, but TikTok in particular. So before I even start working with an artist now, it's like that's a conversation that we have. Like, are you willing to do what it takes? Essentially, I think there's a difference between being an artist who writes songs and being an artist who writes songs who wants to make a living from music. And I now want to work with artists and it's not only just for like the next 10 years. It's like, if you want to make a living from music for the next 30, 40 years, if you're a young person, like early 20s, chances are is that you're going to be wanting to make a living from music for the next 40 years before you retire or whatever. And if you want to do that, then you have to do what it takes. Like, and I think TikTok is part of that. So I now want to work with artists who are ambitious, who, because I've worked with so many incredibly talented musicians. I think some of the most talented people probably that I'll ever work with, who just don't have their heads not in the game, or they don't have the correct mindset really, and those artists unfortunately don't make it, and it's really, really depressing. But I think I've sort of had the experience now enough times that I'm just like, I want to make a living from music, so therefore I need to work with other artists who have the same mindset.
Yeah, yeah. I think to a certain extent, it's kind of going, you have to exist where the audience are, right? Like you can't expect to find an audience where there isn't, where there's no audience using a certain platform or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting, like just before, we kind of kicked this off, we were talking about Oasis. Like, do you think if Oasis were around now, could a band like Oasis succeed on TikTok? Could they break through on TikTok? It's interesting those kind of, yeah, like would they kind of be successful in the modern day if they were starting now?
If they were willing to do it, yes, for sure. It all comes down to, I think these days, it all comes down to whether the artists themselves are willing to use TikTok. But yeah, certainly with those songs, if an artist has got great music and they're willing, like I think I've use Erin LeCount as an example quite a lot, but like I think she's got the mix of the two. I think her songs are brilliant. I genuinely think she's the real deal in terms of her songwriting, and also she produces all of her own music as well. If the songs are absolutely amazing and the content is really, really good, you marry the two, then it's pretty unstoppable, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. I think the other thing that I find, certainly from my own experience of the app, is the speed at which you can do things.
Mm-hmm.
Is that,
Mm-hmm.
the example I mentioned earlier of Samia, actually, that yeah, this artist from the States called Samia, and she had a song that a snippet went viral, and it was actually a clip from an NPR session that they'd done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it was actually a bit different to the original version that was on Spotify, which was actually released about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and within, I think, 36 hours of the snippet sort of kind of going viral and taking off, she'd already announced that she had plans to re-record the song in the new kind of live version style. And then I think within about 72 hours, the song was on Spotify and it was out. And, within a week it had done, million plus streams. And, at that point had probably already paid off the costs of
Mm-hmm.
re-recording the song, right?
Yeah. Is she,
Um,
is she an indie artist? Is she an independent artist?
it's, I think, signed to an independent label, but yeah, but that kind of, I think working with labels that are able to recognize, how
Who are
quickly
nimble?
things can
Yeah,
be done is so
yeah.
important.
Because I think if she'd been on a major, that probably wouldn't have happened. There's so much red tape. Whereas, like, if you can react fast to things, that's the beauty of indies and like independence. And a lot of management companies are now the labels themselves. But like, yeah, the people who are able to react quickly to things in this kind of modern age with social media and TikTok and all the rest of it are definitely the ones who are, I think, winning and getting ahead.
Yeah. And in terms of we haven't really touched on data much, but in terms of the kind of data generated by the app or by TikTok, what are the kind of positive signs that you've tended to see when you mentioned you almost have kind of like a level system for artists.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as being the things that help kind of move an artist forward? And I know follower count is kind of diminishing a little bit in importance, and it's more about sort of the view count and the kind of consistency you're building. Yeah.
Well, it's like I've seen it with artists where they've posted something with a the song with a snippet of their music, and if it's had like 1 million views or something, like not every artist has this, but like one of the artists on the label, Ghosty Kisses, has got a big social media following. It then has a massive, massive effect on Spotify. You can literally see the next day. You go to Spotify for artists, and if it was getting like 1,000 streams a day, it's gone up to 2,000 streams a day. And then if that artist then buys into posting that again and again and again and again, you can then affect that even more. And that's what people are doing. That's why there's an artist, Elle Coves, who's been up on my view page at the moment, and she released a song called Peace recently, and like that's already on 2 million streams. And it was like a month ago, I think, she released that song, but it's because she's been hammering it on TikTok, and she's had, I think, a couple of videos that have gone like to a million. But I think in terms of like recognizing, it can be 15,000 views, with a song snippet, to then be like, okay, well, let's go, let's just keep hammering that, and then you just keep going and you hope that it keeps growing. But then once you get like videos in the hundreds of thousands of views, that's when you definitely see that it starts impacting Spotify. And 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 it's often quite surprising. Like Elle Coves, she's got, I think, a couple of videos which are in the millions, but like more, the rest of her videos are more like 100,000, and it's like 2 million streams in a month. Like you can really seriously impact. And it's obviously what the Lowly Youngs and Good Neighbors and all these different artists have done. Somber, and yeah, it really doesn't take a lot for you to. And another thing as well, because we're very we're a label that want to work with the artists to help them sell tickets on the live side and all the rest of it. And we see the impact on live shows as well. Like particularly if they are on these carousels, if they're kind of doing introductory posts, if they then have their tour poster as like the last slide of the carousel, like, and or it could be like, this person in Hamburg has listened to our song 18 times, and then you kind of have the Hamburg show as the thing, or like you can often like hone in, and you can use the location tag of like a venue or something. You can hone into certain areas to try and sell tickets on tours and that sorts of thing. But yeah, we've seen that as well.
That's great advice. I
Yeah.
think from my perspective, I think a lot of the stuff we've seen with sort of these kind of, yeah, kind of like user generated apps, TikTok being the main one of them, but all, Instagram and YouTube Shorts are kind of, they're also clearly trying to get to that sort of level. It kind of feels a bit like a response to how flat DSPs are in a way. If you're a new artist now, it's immensely difficult to get the opportunities you want to get at DSPs, right? You have to have as you said right at the start, starting a label 10 years ago when you could email a Spotify editor directly and they were actually responsive, and you would get, something back. Nowadays, it's all kind of behind closed doors. I kind of often compare it a bit to like, a new artist releasing a record. It's like HMV agreeing to stock your record, except it's like out the back in storage somewhere, and no one even knows it exists because there's no way of finding it, right? And these kind of UGC platforms have become the discovery tools. Spotify don't really, or not just Spotify, but Spotify, Apple, Tidal, whoever, they don't do a great job really of unearthing new artists for people quite in the same way. And certainly when it comes to not just giving the user the music, but also giving the user the story as well, right? And that's where, being able to combine, a 15-second snippet with the visuals, with some text, as you said, that's kind of where it sort of feels like it brings the whole world together, right?
Yeah, 100%. I've got a friend who works at Interscope, and he was saying that like when he goes in to have conversations with Spotify, they're always asking about UGC. They're so obsessed with TikTok and user generated content and what's the UGC, and like even before a song's released, and that they decide whether they're going to support the song or not. I mean, that's at a big level as well. That's like they're huge artists that we're talking about. And like they want to know that it's almost going viral before they decide to put it on whatever playlist that they're going to put it on.
Yeah. No, it's a complex time, definitely. And
Yeah.
just quickly before I see if anyone's got any questions, in terms of kind of non-creative, so I guess I view anyone that works in the music industry as creative to a certain extent, but non-artistic people, non-musicians, how do you think they best use the platform? If they're wanting to start talking about the music industry, how have you? I know you've touched on it a bit, but how have you kind of found that over the past year or so?
I think there's more people doing it now. When I first started, I feel like there wasn't that many people doing it, and I don't really know. Like for me, it was just like pretty organic. I think it was because as I said, I was starting coaching, so I thought like, how am I going to find clients? And it was more, I was posting more around mindset, and I do often talk about mindset on TikTok, but it's become almost this thing. I've realized now that it's helping the label. It's just helping with visibility for me. It's a great networking tool, and so I think but it also comes with some negatives as well. Like I think some people in the music industry judge you a little bit as well. I think I probably had that a little bit, but I don't really care that much because I was an artist first and foremost. So I don't necessarily see myself as an industry person, really. Sort of like an artist who started a record label and then found some success, and then so I feel like for me, I'm talking to artists, and that's the primary reason why I'm doing it. But yeah, I think like one of the if you don't want to talk about it, if you don't want to talk about the industry on camera, just try and train the algorithm to like stuff that you like, particularly music wise, and you'll start discovering more artists. I now discover artists on the platform, which I didn't really used to that much. I think like me using it more, I'm also coming across like more people who are speaking about the music industry. I'm sort of like connecting with them. But yeah, I would say if you are also looking to do it in terms of like speaking like I am, it's a great networking tool, and it's like I just think I don't see any negatives in it. I think it's a net positive for me. It's been a net positive for me. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. No, I've definitely seen, quite often when your videos come up on my feed, I'll look at the comments and quite a large number of them are artists themselves, right? Asking you questions or sometimes disagreeing with you as well, which is kind of interesting, which
Yeah.
I think it's a good platform for debate at the end of the day sometimes as well, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah. It's my favorite. I've never really liked social media, but it's my favorite social media platform for sure. It's a lot more authentic. I feel like even just talking to camera, that sort of thing. Like I feel like I don't care about my appearance or anything like that because of how TikTok is. Whereas I think Instagram's a lot more curated. So like, me just like literally putting up a video here, like in my living room, it seems to actually, I think it's raw. It's more raw than a lot of other platforms, and I think that kind of thing, like you speaking in a raw manner, is actually a good thing. Um,
Yeah.
so that's another thing that made it far easier for me as well.
Yeah, I think it can come across as a more kind of authentic and honest, right? When you just
Yeah,
see someone who's clearly just, reacted to something and just picked up their phone and just
yeah,
decided off the cuff,
yeah,
speak for a minute about a certain topic or subject, right?
absolutely, yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much for your time, Stevie. I mean, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now. Otherwise, yeah, if you want to, reach out to either, myself or to Stevie, I'm sure Stevie, well, how to connect with Stevie on TikTok. I'll also send a summary email at the end of this with a kind of overview of some of the stuff we've talked about. And also I'll link to Stevie's channels and maybe a few of the artists Stevie works with as well, because we haven't touched on that as much as we perhaps could have done. But yeah, Akira, a great independent record label, a real kind of taste making label. I always view you guys as, which is, I think, it's important to have those kind of creators in the industry still, right?
That's really kind of you to say. That's really nice of you to say because I feel like I feel like we're a dying breed a little bit. I know there are other tastemaker labels out there, but to be a person who loves music and only wants to work with really good music in this day and age as a music industry person, it's quite difficult, I think. Um, so that's been a
Yeah, I think
challenge, I would say.
I know you kind of touched. I mean, this will be the last question, but would you still sign an artist that had no TikTok following or no, and also potentially no kind of desire to use the platform, or do you think that's where you have to draw the line?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the kind of artist. Like if there was if I discovered the next Wonder Horse or something, and like they were really fucking amazing, as a live band. Like if you're just amazing, like as a music or like a McGee or something like that, then I'd be like, okay, I think this could still work. But like the live show would have to be completely badass or something because there's still ways like a Wonder Horse or a Keo or something like that. Like there's still ways of growing artists like that because you could just film. You could just get like people. It could either just be on phones or you could actually get like cinematographers or whatever to come and film their live performance and then just put their live performance. Like I see bands doing that. Like Keo are building their audience doing that. Tooth are doing it, but you have to be badass for that
Yeah,
to work. Like you have
yeah.
to be really, really good.
Yeah, it's
Um,
something I'd love to kind of touch on in another time in a different webinar is kind of how the stage has now become almost like a performance space, not just for people in the crowd, but basically for the whole of the internet, right?
yeah,
We've seen that whether it's like Taylor Swift doing her, surprise songs, or whether it's the Sabrina Carpenter doing the position thing, or all these different things. They're all creating these kind of like unique moment within each set that they know that they've got thousands of people filming and that is quite likely to be the sort of content that does kind of go like user generated stuff that goes viral on TikTok. And I was kind of curious as to whether Oasis might try and do something similar. Seems like they've not. They've just sort of been like, we're just going to play the hits. But no, it's cool. It's yeah, I think certainly those acts you mentioned that are great live and have still been able to grow on TikTok without having to kind of do the sort of like to the
lip
camera
sync.
sort of stuff.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks so much for your time, Stevie.
Oh,
And
thanks for having me.
yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, I'll speak to you soon. Thanks, Stevie. Thanks
Yeah.
everyone.
Cheers, Josh. Thanks, mate.